Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Step Up Nigeria's podcast. The Step Up Nigeria podcast is an initiative built to create awareness of governance issues that highlight the costs of corruption and its impact on service delivery. It is also aimed at promoting values that will help build a society with people of integrity and provide solutions to service delivery challenges faced by everyday Nigerians. Today's episode is focused on the 2025 Corruption Perception Index and the anti corruption fight in Nigeria. I am Joshua Odidi, and I will be your host on this episode. I'm not alone in the studio, of course. I have two anti corruption champions as my guests in the presence of Bathsheba and Nanpak. And I'll let you go ahead to introduce yourselves, and so that our audience can meet you. We'll start from you, Nampak.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, listener, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Joshua, and the team at Step Up, Nigeria. My name is Nanpak Chifat. I'm a communication and governance professional, currently working with Connected Development as communication officer, media relations, here in Abuja, Nigeria.
Please, let's meet you, Bathsheba.
Hey, good morning, Joshua, host, and good morning to our audience. My name is Bathsheba Tagwai. I work with the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLA, which is also Transparency International Nigeria, as Senior Legal Officer and Program Manager Anti-Corruption. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Good to have both of you join us on this interesting conversation. Now, let's get into it. Since its inception in 1995, the Corruption Perception Index, that's Transparency International's flagship research report or product, has become the leading global indicator of public sector corruption. The index offers an annual snapshot of the relative degree of corruption by ranking countries and territories from all over the world. So today, we're asking deeper questions due to the 2025 Corruption Perception Index, which once again placed Nigeria in a position that demands reflection and honestly not outrage or defensiveness like some people are hurriedly doing, but we're asking some questions. What does Nigeria's 2025 CPI score really mean? Are we fighting corruption symbolically or systematically? And what must change if we are serious about building a nation rooted in accountability? And at the end of this conversation, we are hoping our listeners, of course, will understand what the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index measures and what it does not measure. Also hoping that listener will understand Nigeria's performance in the 2025 CPI and what it signals about governance and public trust. And we'll begin by asking a very important question for listeners who are unfamiliar with it. Bathsheba, what exactly is the Corruption Perceptions Index, and what methodology is used for this process?
Thank you once again, Joshua. So the Corruption Perception Index was developed by Transparency International. And this index looks at, the perceived level of corruption in countries, and then annually there's a ranking. So, out of all the countries across the world that are reviewed for that year, um, each country is ranked according to the perceived level of corruption uh, in their country. So that's basically um, what it is. And Transparency International does not provide us data. Instead, it computes the data. So when the data are made available, then it computes them and then put it out for all of us to see. This data that form these rankings and scores for each country are gathered by experts, and business executives. So, and they they are experts. They interact with these countries, right? In one way or the other. So it is from these experts and business executives that
Mm.
the data for each country is gathered. And the corruption perception index looks at public sector corruption. It doesn't look at like private sector corruption. It doesn't look at like individual, but it's the perceived corruption in the public sector of your country. Because whether you like it or not, or whoever comes into a country, especially business experts, executives and all of that, they interact first and foremost with your public sector. And so they are able to learn that data, from their research and from their experience, interacting with each of these countries. So that is how the data is gathered, and then Transparency International computes it and puts it out annually for all of us to see. And like I said, the perception index looks at public sector corruption, administrative corruption, and not private sector and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Just wanted to also mention about the scores range. That is from 0 to 100. What does that also mean when in the whole methodology of it all?
Okay, so for the score is from 0 to 100. And so if you score like 0 being the lowest and then 100 being like the highest. So if you score 0, that means you are like the most corrupt, country. And if you score like 87, 90 something, you're one of the least corrupt countries. So 0 is the lowest and 100 being like the highest. And then we also have the ranking, right? So the ranking is out of just like in a class, out of 100 and something countries, where do you rank based on the data gotten from your score and all of that. So that is the ranking. And even for the ranking, so if you score
Yeah.
140
To
something,
go
like
beyond 100, yeah.
yes, you are highly corrupt, right? And then the lower you go, then you are the least corrupt. So that's how it is. So it's just an aggregate to calculate the average of all the data from all the experts from all the countries, and then the average is calculated and gets your score. So that is basically it. And then for the sources now are the experts and the business executives. Annually, there are a total of 13 sources, that gather this data for the corruption perception index. And it doesn't mean that for an individual country, it has to be 13 sources, but it cannot be less than 10 sources. You understand? So we have a total of 13 sources that provide this data for the corruption perception index. But a country does not have to be rated by data about a country must not come from all the 13 sources. It can be 11, it can be 12, it can be 10, but not less than 10. And then when we have less than 3 countries, less than 3 sources available to provide data for a particular country, then that country will not even be included. Because you need to have a lot more for fairness and for a more robust data collection. You need to have a very high number of sources that can provide data, based on their experience and their research about that particular country. So for 2025, Nigeria had 10 sources that provided data, for our CPI. So 10 sources provided data. I don't know if can read out the sources, and because when we read out the sources, most times people are like, what are the sources? But when I read the sources, you know that these are some of the sources, engaging with Nigeria.
Yeah,
We
authorities,
have the African Development, So we have the African Development Bank, Country Policy and Institutional Assessment. We have Bertelsmann Foundation Transformation Index. We have Economist Intelligence Unit Country Ratings. We have the Global Insight Country Risk Ratings. We have IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook, PRS International Country Risk Guide, Varieties of Democracy Project. We have the World Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment. We always like to use this World Bank because we all know Nigeria's relationship with the World Bank, right? And our borrowing and all of that. So you cannot say World Bank is lying away because they engage very well with Nigeria. World Economic Forum Executive Opinion Survey, and World Justice Project Rule of Law Index. So these are the 10 sources that provided data for Nigeria in 2025.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, for laying the ground, laying the foundation for the conversation. And it just takes us to the next question around Nigeria's ranking. Nigeria scored 26 out of 100 on the Corruption Perception Index, and then it ranked 142nd out of 182 countries, and standing in a position that demands reflection rather than defensiveness, like I said earlier. So now, what would you say is responsible for this decline, NAMPAC, and what must we confront to change this narrative? There have been a lot of talk around anti-corruption fights. However, we keep seeing a decline in our score, in our ranking as well. So what must we do to change this narrative?
Okay, thank you very much once again for having me. And then it's worrying. It's a thing that calls for deeper reflection as a nation that is prides itself as the giant of Africa. But you see, amidst the plethora of things that continue to cause this decline and continue to weaken the system, governance system, and the challenge is top among them is weak institutional accountability. You'll agree with me that many of our corruption institutions, from the ICPC, the EFCC, and even state, at the subnational, they now have, anti-corruption bodies and the rest. They are not truly independent, right? So ability for it to be independent and to be able to also have the enforcement capacity, it's a challenge. And when we have these, and this is often led by political interference. So when we continue to have this, when the institution that is supposed to fight corruption, when the institutions that are supposed be be that face that challenges corruption and bring those that are found wanted to book, prosecuting them, you know and also convicting them, when all of these systems are weak, when all of these institutions don't have the independence as it should, it stands as a challenge. Another thing is the lack of transparency in our public financial systems. I mean, go through our public financial system, you see that there are a lot of loopholes. Recently, I learned that there was a budget hearing, and a particular minister was asked certain questions, and the minister couldn't provide sufficient reasons. Remember that the Corruption Perception Index is how a country is perceived, and when you begin to see these loopholes, when you begin to hear things as this, you see more reasons why citizens continue to struggle. You see reasons why people continue to have mistrust in the system. You see reasons why you begin to ask, I mean, where's the transparency in the system? And you see, this lack of public transparency is not just at the national level. It also goes down to the subnational, the state government, the local government, who is asking the questions. All of us, most of us in the civil society organization and in the media, we focus our attention on the national, what is happening in Abuja, what is happening in the National Assembly, what is happening at the villa, what is happening across ministries. But we often lose sight of what is happening at the subnational levels. We don't ask the question. And you see, permit me to say that these are some of the places where transparency is lacking a lot. Recently, sometimes last year, Connected Development began a series where with its Follow the Money platform called Facts About LGA FAC. And all what we were interested is in putting out the figures to the Nigerian people to see, look, this is the allocation that is being given to social local government in this month. For example, there was a month that Langtan North local government, where I came from, got about 400 and something million naira in a month.
Mm.
Where is the transparency in all of this? This is what is allocated. Was it released? And when it is released, where did it go to? So when we continue to have loopholes as this, there is no transparency in public finances, it stands also as a challenge for us in Nigeria. And that is why maybe the 26, if we have more transparency in our public finances, that would have improved our perception,
Yeah.
among players. Another thing I will say is uh, limited consequences for corruption. Um, Most times when we hear that people are being tried, for corrupt cases, is as if is selective in its appearance. So that itself is another perception that is given, about the system. When accountability continue to fail, it continue to fail in delivering, very, very credible sanction, you know, it makes corruption to be normalized. I mean, virtually everywhere in well, let me not say everywhere, but in some certain sectors in Nigeria, corruption have been so normalized in the sense that if you don't give in journalism, they call it qua or brown envelope.
Brown
You know,
envelope. Yeah.
you don't get some certain things done. You don't get some certain things, passed. So it has so become normal that for you they'll tell you, give this thing, make him help you now. And he won't help me, make I give her this thing, make him help me. There are no consequences. People just engage in corruption and it has become the order of the day. You understand? So, and it's important for us, especially in the civil society system, that we don't only talk about this thing, but also practice this thing. Recently, well, I'm on the verge of I'm writing an article, and I titled it "The Corruption of Fighting Corruption," because within the systems of fighting corruption, within the systems of calling out people and the rest, there are also certain degree of corruption that exist. So how then can we change the narrative? So we must leave the part of this is what is happening, normalizing corruption, but calling out people, not only shaming them, but prosecuting them. Government must do well to ensure that it prosecutes all of these people. And we need to understand that fighting corruption is not just about arresting people, after the bag have been laid bare. Fighting corruption is more about building a system where corruption becomes very difficult to commit, or possibly impossible. But you see, the Nigeria that we are today, you and I know that we are going through a lot. And if we must fight corruption, we must ensure that in in sincerity of purpose, we strengthen the institutions that are meant to fight corruption, our anti-corruption institution. We must ensure that we engage in our public finances, our public procurement system must engage in public accounting, and all of these things must ensure that our finances are open, they are transparent enough. And I believe as we continue to engage with the system, we can work together to see that where we are, 26. Maybe we can do better in the next report that
Right.
will be coming up.
Ranking. Yeah.
But there is a lot to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that insightful submission as well. Also looking forward to corruption and fighting corruption, that particular article you mentioned. But yeah, you did touch on a couple of points that would also cascade into the next round of questions. I'm basically just asking if institutions, if they are insulated from political interference. You touched a bit about judicial efficiency, political will also versus political messaging. Do we have all of these in check? And then also the enforcement of anti-corruption laws. Are they independent? Are they free to, do that? Or would some people feel like they are being witch hunted when they are picked by anti-corruption agencies and so on. But Bathsheba, would begin with you. What does it truly mean to fight corruption practically, and how can CSOs and active citizens participate in this fight for accountability?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Um, in order to fight corruption, especially in Nigeria, there has to be the political will, first of all,
Mm.
political will, to actually fight that corruption. And Josh Lampard actually mentioned lots of issues around that lack of political will. I
Yeah.
don't know when we'll get it right, but it's one thing to say, oh, we want to fight corruption, we have anti-corruption agencies and all of that, but it's another thing to actually give them, the independence to fight that corruption. You know, Initially, of course, you have the Independent National Independent Corrupt Person and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, we have EFCC, and all of that. And for the mere fact that the president has the power to appoint who becomes the chairman of any of those institutions already takes away that level of independence. Civil society, uh, a while back, not too long ago, you know, um, participated. My organization, I participated in the new bill amendments, and public hearing to amend
Mm.
the ICPC and the EFCC Act to kind of give them some level of, independence. They said, okay, why don't we amend the manner through which the chairman of those institutions are appointed? Because at the end of the day, who we pay the piper dictates the tone. So
Mm.
they said, okay, amend it to say there has to be, confirmation by the National Assembly. There has to be for appointment, and same for, you know, uh, disengagement. But what have we seen when we have a National Assembly currently that dances to the whims and caprices of the executive? It makes whatever amendment we have done futile, because we don't have the National Assembly is supposed to be the voice of the people. They are representing us. They're supposed to the aim of the parliament to serve as a check to the executive. But when you have a parliament that seems to be more loyal to the executive than to the people that they are there to
Yeah.
represent, our amendment becomes futile. And they have also found a pattern. If you notice, the previous chairman of EFCC were just suspended, and from the suspension, we just got new chairman. So they have found a way around all those things. They suspend you, it becomes an indefinite suspension, and then because there are corruption allegations, of course, the matter is being investigated. So you cannot come back to office. You have to vacate the office, and that way you are gone. It is not the way it is supposed to be within that act that has set up. Same with our INEC, because at the end of the day, INEC plays a huge role in, you know, our current democracy. We have an INEC chairman that's same thing appointed by the person, by the executive, and whether we like it or not, that influences to some extent, how they act. Their allegiance seems to be more towards the ruling party and to the executive. And because of that, we have seen we also have very weak political party structures, right? Because there is no transparency, there's no effectiveness in even how our political party financing. We have powerful individuals who are politically exposed persons, who are government officials that are funding and financing their parties. And when you finance your party, you have so much power. We've seen it happen with the major parties in our country. You have so much power, and then it's so hard for your party to stand up, and make decisions, uh, even that are against you, even if what you're suggesting is wrong, you know. And so now what do we see? We see everybody coming to the ruling party. Why?
Yeah.
To save their positions. When we have opposition, effective opposition, it also keeps people in government in check. And then also the citizens have a huge role to play. That is just the truth. We know that our the government plays a role, anti-corruption plays a role, but the citizens also play a huge role. Why? Because we have become very sentimental as a people. When there is an allegation of corruption against a person, we begin to say, oh, he's from my tribe. Oh, it's because he's from that religion. Oh, it's because he's from this religion. It takes away from the main issue. And before you have so many distractions, and then it just goes under the water. So as a citizen, we need to actually change our mindset, reorient ourselves, change our value system, and begin to, when if people are found guilty, if people there are allegations against them, let them be investigated and let appropriate action be taken against them. EFC and ICPC are doing a good job to the best of their ability, whether it's on asset recovery, sensitization, and all of that. But the problem is the media trials that we see, so there are allegations. Everyone is a high profile person, there's all over the media, and I don't care anything again about it anymore. And then we see some people with EFCC cases being appointed into government. How do you expect them to actually take action or empower the institutions that will punish them? You can see, so we are not even supposed to have people who have allegations of corruption in government. And that also shows our value system, because most of us even support it. We are happy because it's from my place, it's from your place, it's my religion. And so why the people have decided to accept a certain attitude from, the government, from their leaders and all of that, it becomes the norm, and we don't see anything, in it. Then the media and civil society. Truthfully, the media and civil society, I think without media and civil society, I don't know where we would have been in Nigeria at the moment, because we don't have an opposition. So basically, the media and society are the ones that have been speaking out, putting a check on government, speaking out about issues, advocating for issues that will, that will benefit the citizens. There should also be respect for human rights. Our constitution has provisions that speak to our human rights: freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of association. And so when people want to protest, when people want to speak out, when journalists are doing their investigative work, they should be allowed to do so. They should be respected. Their rights should be respected. Because when you shut down the civic space, when you trample on the rights of people to express themselves, to associate, to speak and to lay their grievances, you are trampling on their human rights, and that is not good for those are some of the issues that made us rank 26. Because all these things happened between last year, beginning of last year, down to even this year. People are afraid to go out to protest. Journalists are afraid to do their work, or to investigate journalists. We are still asking where that data. It's the trending thing in recent times. And there are so many journalists. As at last year, Media Rights released their 2025 annual report, and they said there are 86 documented incidents of attacks and targets on journalists in Nigeria. Just 2025. Those are the ones that are documented. We don't even know the ones that did not even come to light. So it's a serious issue, and so like I said, willpower, political willpower from, our leaders, the executive, the legislative arm of government. They have to be willing and take practical steps, in empowering anti-corruption agencies, whether it's with funding, whether it's allowing the laws that created these agencies to work effectively. That is another thing. Then the citizens, we need to have a value orientation, change our mindset. We need to educate ourselves. We have the media, we have National Orientation Agency, we have so many organizations that have the responsibility to educate, to sensitize citizens on issues of corruption and human rights. But I don't know what is happening. And even as a citizen, we should take away tribal and religious sentiments, and call out people who are doing wrong, people who are corrupt, people who are going against the rule of law. Call them out, but we are blinded by sentiments, and that will take us, 100 years back.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much, Pasteva. Thank you for that very detailed point and submission as well to that question. But Nampak, I mean, you're in the I've seen your work in the development space, the civil society organizations as well, and then now I'm asking the same question around how you think civil society organizations and active citizen participation can strengthen real accountability. What steps can they take? What steps can CSOs take and active citizens take to strengthen accountability in Nigeria?
So let me say this. When citizens track public funds, truth is that corruption will reduce and service delivery tends to increase. So that's first thing first, right? And for civil society organizations and for citizens, we need to understand that we have a role, and especially for us in the media, we pride ourselves as the fourth estate of the realm. We are active watchdogs, in every system. especially in the Nigerian system. So we need to ensure that beyond rhetorics, beyond words, we are actually active citizens, whereby we track, whereby we ask questions, whereby we demand for accountability, whereby we don't celebrate mediocrity because of political patronage, but rather call our people. When they do right, we call them, we say, thank you, you did right. When they do wrong, we call them out. So we must be active watchdogs. And let me tell you, and this is the simple truth. Not only in Nigeria, but everywhere around the world, corruption thrives in secrecy. So
Mm.
if we continue to allow things to operate in secrecy, we don't call out people, we don't do public scrutiny, corruption will continue to thrive. And I mean, for Nigeria, that's how it has continued to thrive. There was a time in this country that a certain politician made a statement that if you come to my political party, your sins will be forgiven. And instantly, we saw certain high profile politicians that were having questions to answer with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission move to that political party. And I don't know, maybe because, or maybe actually EFCC did not find anything. But after a while, we had that the cases against them were dropped because of certain reasons. Maybe they will tell you insufficient reasons or evidence, to support the earlier claim. But the truth is that um, we must. So I'm now jumping from the fact that citizens need to be active, and citizens also need to demand. Bishop was speaking earlier about the call, that was done some time back around independency of ICBC and EFCC. I also want to say that until those anti-corruption body are fully independent in the sense of independence, we'll continue to have this problem. You understand? We'll continue to
Yeah.
have this problem. Anti-corruption bodies need to not only have operational independence, but in its whole system be independent, from resources to access to the judiciary to everything it does. But you agree with me, the way it looks now, it's as if some persons are, especially when you are in the opposition, how many times have you heard that a certain politician in a ruling party was convicted for corrupt cases? That is one thing to think about, right? So we must ensure that those institutions are independent in the true sense of it. And then we must also ensure that as citizens, in our call to demand for transparency, and as in a regard in regard of us being watchdog, we demand for open budgeting, open governance, transparency in our governance system, in our governance processes. Where do we usually have corruption cases within that system? Budget, our contracting processes, they need to be open. I did a course while doing a master's in public administration called uh, e-public finance. It's all about digitizing public financial system. These things have worked in other climes. So why are we delaying? Recently, there was we had that the before you access the airport, you need, we usually know that you pay for ticket before you access the airport. And then recently we learned that it was digitized. There was a process whereby you use card. You need to phone your card, swipe before you enter. But this morning I just learned that that whole process was cancelled because as you fight corruption, corruption will fight you. So many reasons were given, but we know that if we truly want that system to be transparent, we need to go digital in all of our processes, in all of our doing. I did, and for this may not be so much connected to this, but I just finished an online university, and the whole process was done digitally. I paid online. I sat in my house. I did my studies. I wrote my exams. Everything. So you don't see where they will tell you, come and bring 5,000 naira for handout. Come and pay examination fee 2,000 naira, or come and pay ticket slip 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira. We need to digitize our processes. We need to digitize our governance. We need to have e-governance, whereby while we have humans drive these processes, this system, we have these systems that are seamless. If not, we'll continue to struggle. So one practical thing amidst citizens and civil society, media being active watchdog is to ensure that these institutions are independent in the real sense of it, and that there is transparency in governance. When we have transparency in governance, you will be sure that the perception, not only because when there's transparency in governance, it builds public trust. And when public trust is built, it means that they have a more favorable perception. I major in public relations, so I understand issues around perception. When public are able to trust a particular system or a process, you see that they will have a favorable perception towards either that process or that system, But when we continue to have, trust deficit, it fuels corruption. Corruption actually fuels trust deficit, right? So we need to understand this thing and drive and call for transparency.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We'll just quickly move to the next question, which is around the role. What role does values education play in lasting reform? That's one of the things, a core area in terms of our work here at Step Up Nigeria, values education. And so it's an interesting aspect in terms of the fight against corruption, in terms of morals, and in terms of preserving the next generation. And so the question now is, how can we move from a survival mindset to a culture of integrity? We've often heard people say, I'm just doing this, or I'm compromising to get by, I'm compromising, to survive. We've often seen how some people sell their vote buying and all of that. Well, how can we move from that survival mindset to a culture of integrity to ensure that people are able to resist corruption, resist bribery, and act with integrity? Nampak.
Okay, so let me maybe begin by saying that corruption um usually does not start with those high profile, you know, cases that we hear. Corruption usually begins, it's like a baby walk. You begin to crawl, then you take your first step, the second step, and you see the child begins to run, gradually, and then you become an expert in it and all of that. And so corruption begins in Hausa kadan kadan, and then when we normalize it, right, it becomes our everyday life. So and then it's not about you shifting those millions of naira, or it begins by, even if it is coming late to school, even if it is, I made mention of something earlier, let me pay something so that he can fast track. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Which one is fast tracking? There is a laid down procedure, ABC. You are now adding A plus to the process because you want to fast track. You see, gradually we're entering. It's about ignoring traffic light. As simple as the light is showing red. Red means stop. You are, beating the traffic. It's about, oh, I know this person in this office. Let me call him. He's my person. You see, all of these things, they are gradual step that let me use the word institutionalize corruption in our mindset. And you see, corruption is not just about the institutions, the processes, the system. It has it's gradually becoming a part of us. You made mention about behavior. It's gradually becoming a culture whereby if you don't do A, B, and C that are not as it should, you don't get some certain things done. So we need to begin to teach, especially our younger ones, what is the right way, what is the right thing. Don't beat the traffic. Follow the line, follow the queue. Oh, as little as growing up, we learned that there were miracle centers to ride WAEC. In my school, then, if you are caught in anything that looks like malpractice, you will leave. But these days, we now have miracle centers whereby parents are the one taking their words to those centers. So we need to lead by example from the home. We need to lead by example from the home. We need to lead by example in our places of worship. We need to lead by example in our communities. We need to call for and pursue, I'm a Christian, and the scripture says that pursue righteousness. We need to come to the point whereby we pursue ethical public service. We pursue ethical public leadership. We pursue ethical living. Even as an individual, you live ethically. You don't do some certain things not because they are pleasing or not pleasing to you, because ethically it is wrong. I am a communicator by practice, and if I decide to do journalism today, I should be ethical in my practice. These are some of the things that we need to put in place. These are the things that we need to do so that we move from what is obtainable now. We move from the whatsoever we see today to birth a new generation whereby we value the fight against corruption. Because you see, those that are high up, it has become like it's been built on the inside of them. And so for us, especially in the civil society, media, and as active citizens, we need to make it an everyday thing, that we practice it in every way possible. So we need to ensure that we have this system in place. We need to ensure that we practice it. We need to imbibe it in the people around us so that they don't see it as it becomes a culture. You understand? There are things that you don't do because it's not your thing. So we need to make the fight against corruption like that. We need to pursue ethical living because without it, we don't get things right.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, Unpack. Yeah, because we're coming to the end of the conversation, but I mean, this has been really interesting and insightful. We're talking about the Corruption Perception Index and what role citizens can play in the fight against corruption, and also to ensure that there's an improvement when we talk about Nigeria generally. We are able to shift from the country where a lot of people feel like things cannot work, or because of corruption, a lot of things can't be done, to that country where, integrity is our everyday um, culture, is our lifestyle as well. And now we are moving to you, Batsheba, and then asking what concrete reforms would drive meaningful CPI improvement, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years, and how can we sustain genuine political will, beyond election cycles?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, how can we sustain genuine political will? Like you said, beyond political cycle. But again, the people we put into power, the people we put into power have to a large extent, the responsibility to drive this change that we are talking about, especially since the perception is based on our public sector. So we have to be very intentional, and we have to be very careful and be very deliberate on the kinds of people that we elect, to govern us, because those are the people that will be making the decisions regarding these institutions we're talking about, regarding whatever reforms or laws that's we that are supposed to guide us towards achieving, a better corruption perception result. So that is one. And then secondly, we also have um, some of our laws that need to be effectively um, implemented. We talk about the Process of Crime Recovery and Management Act. We have it right now, yes, and in recent time, Nigeria has been commendably been able to recover and repatriate some, assets that have been, taken to destination countries. However, it's still a new law. We haven't tested all these provisions yet, in the sense that there are still question marks and questions around the transparency of the management and disposal of some of those assets. And so one thing that has to be done is there needs to be published like a data, a database where people will be able to actually see, details, information on. Now we have a number of institutions who have, you know, a responsibility under the act to recover assets. And a lot of these institutions, in our conversations with them, have their own individual database where they upload information regarding these recovered assets. But are they accessible to Nigerians, even if not to the general public, civil society, the media, people who actually work and carry out advocacy in these areas? Those data are not yet available per se. Now everything is supposed to be now Ministry of Justice oversight over all these institutions. Ministry of Justice also said has its own database that we still do not have access to. So there needs to be maybe like a consolidation of all those data into a central database where people can have access, where we can use information from this data to 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 carry out advocacy and also to promote transparency. This is accountability that we're demanding. These are assets, taxpayers' money that have been recovered, and they need to be put into judicious use. There are reports of some of the uh, funds that have been used for infrastructure and all of that, but there needs to be a lot more transparency regarding that. I know recently there's a bill before the National Assembly where they are trying to establish, the bill seeks to establish you know, an agency that will now manage these assets and dispose of them. So we are watching and see how that goes. There are a lot of controversy around that. Some of the anti-corruption
Yeah.
agencies, majorly PSC and SPC, are against that. While we have some other lawmakers, especially the Committee on Anti-Corruption and Human Rights, with their own reasons why there should be such an agency, and all of that. So that is one. We need effective implementation of that bill. Our Public Procurement Act. If you look at data, a huge, a huge number of corruption takes place during our procurement processes. And we have the Public Procurement Act that is supposed to guide every activity, every action regarding procurement in Nigeria. There are a lot of, whether it's nepotism, whether it is even the award of contracts, the entire process, the bidding, everything. There's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of transparency and a lot of gaps, you know, in the implementation of that Public Procurement Act. So that is one area that needs reforms. We need effective use. We need more transparency and more transparency regarding our public procurement processes in Nigeria. Also talk about the whistleblower protection bill. That is a bill that has been before the National Assembly in a very, very long time. That bill will actually take us far in a fight against corruption, because right now a lot of people who even want to report, you know, and speak out, demand accountability about certain things, are afraid to speak out because of what? They're afraid of backlash. They're afraid of being attacked. Like we have the Freedom of Information Act that has been was enacted in 2011, but up till now, the level of implementation has been very low. Has been very low. Yeah, I know that even by our organization, we have um written some FOI requests and we got response, but that doesn't mean I will now say it's effective, because whenever we engage with Nigerians, a lot of people, especially look beyond Abuja, look at even at the state level, there are a lot of people that still find it difficult to access information from government institutions. The act says there should be FOI desk officers in public institutions who will then receive reports and be able to be responsible for providing the response and all of that. Go around government institutions, even here in Abuja, how many of them have FOI desk offices? These are the issues that promote transparency and accountability. There are public institutions serving the people, you know, being paid and run by taxpayers' money. And if people request for information that are not under the excluded information within that act, they should be able to have access to that information. Then we talk about our judiciary. Yes, the judiciary, there needs to be a lot of reforms within our judiciary because there's been a lot of complaints on lack of transparency, corruption within our judiciary, and all of that. Even recently, I think was it in January, the National Judicial Council had to take decisive action on some judges, because there were allegations of corruption on those judges. So there needs to be, because at the end of the day, judiciary is a group of common man. Everybody goes there. So if people do not trust the judgment that comes from our court, if people do not trust the transparency and the integrity of our courts, what then happens to the common man? Even during the elections, there are allegations that people were complaining about conflicting judgments. If you remember, after the 2022 elections, conflicting judgment, High Court will say one thing, and people will say another thing. I mean, all those things poked a hole into the integrity of our judicial system. And so there needs to be, I feel like whistleblowing channels even within our judiciary, and so that people can report, and we need to see NJC, punishing judges who have been investigated and found wanting, or even lawyers found wanting with regards to their integrity. Also, we've talked about it several times, the independence of our anti-corruption agencies, ICPC, EFCC, NFIU, even the Code of Conduct Bureau, because the Code of Conduct Bureau plays a very huge role in all of this. Because we're talking about asset declaration. These are things that public officials need to do before they come into office, and then even when they're leaving office. That is where the corruption starts most of the time. And sometimes when we're talking about anti-corruption agencies, we always forget Code of Conduct Bureau. But all these agencies need to be able to operate independently and free from political interference. They need to be adequately funded. Because there's one issue that some of them have, forget ICPC, forget EFCC, there are some of the others. If you go to the offices, you will see the difference, and all that. So they don't even have enough money to even maybe recruit more hands, and all of that, or to do the work the way they're supposed to do. And so all these things matter. We know the anti-corruption agencies are doing amazing to the best of their ability, but we need to see more high-profile cases pursued to a logical conclusion. We're talking about conviction to serve as a deterrent to the high and mighty and the powerful people within the country. And we do not want to see people who have cases with EFCC, with ICPC, now getting political appointments. What does it say? It's like it's a reward for bad behavior. He's not going to, like, you're not going to deter anybody. Instead, you'd be like, okay, maybe I need to still big. I need to, amass so that I will intimidate, the government so that they will be able to come after me. So these are things, and then for our National Assembly, I feel like our National Assembly needs to prioritize, the people. They need to prioritize their constituents. They need to prioritize the people that they represent. They need to actually do the work that they have been elected to do, which is to serve as a check, to represent the interests of Nigerians, and also to hasten, the passage into law of bills, legislation that would actually benefit, Nigerians. You understand? That will improve our governance system, that will benefit Nigerians. And also for our civil society and journalists, like I said earlier, they play a very, very critical role. And we want to encourage them to continue the good work that they are doing, and not to allow themselves to be used, by anyone, to advocate for what is not in the interest of Nigerians. And then lastly, I want to say, Step Up Nigeria, thank you so much for the work you're doing with the young people. I wanted to answer that question also that you asked NAFAC, because like I feel like, like we're Christians, they say, train up a child in the way he will grow, right? And you will not depart from it. And so catching them young, getting people from a very young age, like from primary school and all that, and teaching them the core values of living with integrity, doing the right thing, the anti-corruption and all of that, it's embedded in them. You might not even realize the depth of what you're doing, but it is embedded, it sticks in their head. They know this is wrong, this is right, and they know that there is punishment for bad behavior. And especially when they see it happen, it goes a long way. But we need to also, as a society, because these children will grow and they'll come into the society. Imagine after training them, then they know, no, it's no right, you punish them for malpractice and all that. And they come into the society and they begin to see another different thing. Society is not structured in the way they were taught. It makes them feel disappointed. You understand? It just feels like, oh, it's like, so what is the reward? There are people like that, even grown up adults like us, that say, is there any reward for this my good behavior. You feel like, oh, maybe I should join the band. Oh, yeah, people that are doing like this, you know, it's going well for them and all of that. So it's very important, and it's very good to train to not to sensitize and educate Nigerians, especially those are the rural areas, the young people, and thank God for organizations like yours, but also encourage other civil society and even the media and government institutions. I keep saying National Orientation Agency because I know that is their mandate to educate and sensitize Nigerians on, issues, government policies, and all of that. Um, so I think a lot has to be done regarding public awareness, value reorientation, and all of that. Because if you tell somebody not to pay bribe or not to sell their books and all of that, they sometimes some people say, it has to be worth it. Do you understand? It has to be worth it. Will my vote even count? That's what some people say. I'm just playing devil's advocate. We can't learn does it will it even count? So I don't sell my vote. This person will steal me. It's not better I sell my vote and get this small money, even though we know that you eat that 2,000 naira, 5,000 naira, you spend it there and you suffer for the remaining 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
So, in as much yes, so a lot lies on our hands. The youth, the younger people, they are the future generation. So we believe that whatever it is we are teaching them and educating them about, they will work towards a better society. But we owe it to them to actually live a better society and to
Mm.
see that they are not shortchanged by doing the right thing. That it actually pays to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very a robust point there. I mean, very, very interesting to hear from you on that particular question. But quickly, yeah, because since you've just, spoken about young people, um, now I'm just asking, what role should young Nigerians play in pushing accountability forward and shaping a more transparent future? Nan Park, let's take your view and then we'll come back to you, Bashima.
So let me say this. We all know that the youth are the largest demography in Nigeria right now.
Yeah.
About 60+%, 60, 70% of the Nigerian population are, youthful population. And you see, with this, and as you get older, right, we just normalize some certain things. And that is why you find corruption so much among the older people, because we tend to normalize some certain way of life, some certain behaviors, some certain cultures, and it just becomes it's a normal thing. You see this youthful population, and with the point I said earlier, and with the amazing work that Step Up is doing, trying to engage younger generation, that is where we need to put our focus. Because the youthful population is an energetic population. They have the strength, they have the vigor. Most times I used to say, even though that's not what it is, I usually say that they have close to nothing to lose. So if, like, I mean, we've seen situation in certain nations where the youthful population demanded some certain change, and even, not only change in the way things are done, even change in government.
Mm.
So we see that they are actively participant in the system. So one thing that the Nigerian youth can do for themselves, and especially the Gen Z, because for me, I somewhat feel that they are the future of Nigeria. They are if we must achieve any change, we must achieve it with them. We saw it with what happened, with the 2020 NSAS protests. Young people from across the nation wanted an end to a a a an endemic that have bedeviled the nation. I believe strongly that if we can mobilize young people and orient them properly, check out all the civil society organizations in Nigeria right now. Count 10 civil society organizations in Nigeria. You will see that the founders of those civil society organizations, 10, 20, began when they were young people, very, very young. Some of them as young as 20. began advocacy, began calling for some certain reforms. These days, we just tend to forget that when you are in that age gap, there is certain vigor and strength, permit me to say anger in you, that you want things to work. So we need to engage them, we need to orient them, we need them to see the light. This is what is possible, this is what is achievable. That's one step. We know that with the advancement in technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of that, we can also begin to engage with young people to come up with platforms that can help expose corruption, platforms that can help government governance to work, to thrive. I told you earlier about a course I did called e-public finance. We have e-governance also. Countries like Estonia and the rest are doing amazingly well. So we need to have something like that whereby they build these systems or they also engage with these systems. Right now, everybody wants to sit at the comfort of their home and carry out tasks, be it payment of or getting things for themselves, payment for certain services or product. We need to ensure that even governance itself is digitized so that these people can not only engage with it offline but also engage with it online. Young people are most times used as social media talks. I use the word social media talks, especially during electioneering processes and times. You know, we're in 2026 January, we'll be having our first election, 2027. Right now,
Awesome.
you see a plethora of young people just wasting their energy and vigor online, insulting this political party and insulting the other person. They don't only stop at issues, they go deep into personality. On a lighter note, you know, my state, Plateau State, from where I come from, we now have a certain degree of sanity in the social media space because the opposition and everybody, they are now in the same party. So nobody is insulting anybody. To some extent, we have peace. While we really want opposition, because with our opposition, I mean, there is certain degree of check and balance. There's certain degree of putting government on their toes. Well, we have everybody in the same political party. Our social media space have a certain degree of sanity. After the primaries, I believe we'll go back to where we are coming from. But young people need to understand that they have so much power in them. There was a time while I was in the university, I made a single post. I was invited to the security division of the University of Jos again and again. In fact, I had to meet with the deputy dean of student affairs, threatening to expel me. But it was nothing out of school system had a problem. Students were asked to pay school fees again, which was no fault of theirs. I was calling on them to do the right thing. Young people need to understand that with the digital tools we have in our hands, we can actually set government on their toes to do the right thing. We also need to drive for ethical leadership. People amidst us that are doing right, let us praise them, let us encourage them. Young people, we have a lot of power, we have a lot of strength, and if we must fight corruption in Nigeria, we must fight it together with young people.
Thank you so much, Napak, for that. If we must fight corruption in Nigeria, we must fight it together with young people. Let's quickly get your thoughts on that particular question, Basheva.
I'll just jump on Nankat's second to the last point about encouraging them when you see them doing the right thing, because there's nothing that kills your spirit, there's nothing that kills your morale when you're doing the right thing and it just seems like it's going in 50-50. So when we see young people doing the right thing, when we see them trying to be upright, when we see them trying to shun corruption, we should encourage them. And if we can, we should even reward them. You know, the truth of the matter is that there are a lot of young people that want a change, that are ready to do the right thing. But the situation of the country economically, you know, and is not encouraging. And so, beyond the encouragement with words of mouth and all of that, you know, we should also provide opportunities for them to actually be able to express themselves. You should be given the opportunity to express themselves. We allow them to express themselves, to feel heard, you know, and you see the amazing things that they'll be able to do and achieve. And there are a lot of young people who look at the high rate of insecurity in the country. When you see pictures and videos of some of these people involved in this crime, they are young people. Why? Because of tiredness, lack of empowerment, lack of anything to do. And they say devil's mind, an idle mind is devil's workshop. When you have nothing to do, and then the future seems bleak. The employment rate in Nigeria is so low, you know, and because the economy is so bad, some of them that are creative, that want to do something that they don't even have the capital to even start, whether it's a business or to pursue a dream and all of that. So the government, needs to make the society provide an enabling environment for young people to thrive, for young people to express themselves, for young people to be empowered, and even gainfully employed. Because at the end of the day, these are some of the issues that make them to become discouraged and to begin to, take steps backwards and divert into other lifestyles or other things that they ought not to do. So there should be, from the individual level, encouragement, like I said, for young people, and then at the society level, the government, know that we need to actually create an enabling environment for young people to thrive and to be able to express themselves, whether it's through a job, through their business, through their creativity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Batsheba. So yeah, quickly your last words. Let's get your conclusion, your social media handles as well, how listeners can reach you out there, and yeah.
You can reach me anywhere. Nanpak Chefat, that's my name. Google everywhere. Let me just drop it there. But also, let me see this as a final thought that the real fight against corruption is not in speeches, right? The real fight against corruption, it's about building a nation that is not only perceived to be transparent and have integrity, but actually making it very, very difficult for corruption to even see the light of the day. It's possible. It's a lot. It's possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Batsheba.
Okay, so my final thoughts, I'll just say that fighting corruption starts from you and I. It's an individual. We have to start individually, because at the end of the day, the people in government are individuals. And if you're a corrupt person in your little community right now, you will still be a corrupt person when you find yourself in position of power or in government or in public office, if you do not change your mindset and orient yourself. Internationally, Nigeria has a very poor image. Why? Because some of us individuals, when we travel and we go to other places, we get involved in all sorts of things, which dents the image of the country internationally. So we see that it starts with you and I. It is only if I choose to shun corruption, I choose to speak and demand accountability, that is the only time that we'll see the change that we want to see. And okay, how to reach me? I'm Batsha Batawe on, if you Google me, and then on Facebook, Batsha Batawe, and then CISLA, Civil Society Legislative Liability Center on Facebook. You can check our website as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. That's the size of today's episode of the Step Up Nigeria podcast show. But do remember that the corruption perception index is not a destiny, it is a diagnosis. And of course, every diagnosis is a step toward reform. And for Nigeria's own anti-corruption fight, it will not be won by press statements alone. It will definitely be won by strengthening institutions, like my guests have said, and also protecting whistleblowers. Step of Nigeria actually just outlined a world whistleblower art and media competition. So if you're listening, do well to look out for that particular competition. And of course, and just like Nampak said, corruption thrives in silence. So we must do well in silence and secrecy. So we must do well to, speak out at all times. And Basheba also made an important point that is tied to our annual Anti-Corruption Star Awards, which is reward is a great form of encouraging anti-corruption champions. So let's always do well to encourage young people who we see are doing, the right thing. And thank you to everyone who has listened to this particular episode. If this episode inspired or challenged you, please share it and spread the word, because accountability is a shared responsibility. You can follow us across all social media platforms to stay updated on our work and opportunities. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're at Step Up for Social Development and Empowerment in Nigeria. On X, that is formerly Twitter. You can find us at step_up_Nigeria, same username for Instagram. And finally, on Facebook, you can find us at Step Up Nigeria. You can also stay connected and access our resources through the Sun mobile app, which is now available for download. You can check us out on Google Play Store or Apple Play Store. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and always step up. I am Joshua Odidi. Thank you so much, Nanpak. Thank you, Batsheba, for doing this with us. Bye and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.